It's been an awesome offseason so far. And as we approach that deadline of the season starting, it's pretty exciting. I mean, there's a lot to get excited about. There's a lot to ponder. And there's a lot to think about as far as, how is this team going to look? And, the one thing I do want to predicate this entire video is these spots that we're referring to, and I'm not knocking any single person or anybody's predictions at all, because quite frankly, we don't really know. But it's going to be determined at camp. There are always a couple surprises and always a couple, I don't want to say disappointments, but projections that don't end up leading the way we all assume that they will. But the nice part about this season is that there's an air of mystery to it, where I would say previously in the past we kind of more knew what our lines were going to be. But I would say this mystery comes with more positivity than the past. Typically, the question marks in your lineup are not a good representation of where your team is. If you don't know who your second line center is, or your top line winger, or your top pairing defender, these are things that can really bite you as a team. And not just that, just bite the coaching staff, right? Because it forces them to experiment more. It forces you to utilize your preseason and your training camp differently. And rather than kind of getting locked in to process, you're found experimenting a bit more. Now, I do think there's going to be a good amount of experimentation because there's a bunch of new faces. But I don't think that the experimentation will be bad in this case. It's not. It's more of the Flyers have a bevy of options to kind of ponder. And I want to go through my potential lines. I'll kind of list what I think the lines will be, and then I'll also list what I think will be some surprises. However, before I start that, I do want to get into the training camp, the dev camp in particular. Typically, in the past, I haven't missed these. Maybe I miss a day or two. But I'm always at them. I always want to see the players in person. It's where I tend to understand them a little bit better. It's where you can notice the little details that you're not going to see on television, how they perform between shifts, how they are on the ice when the camera's not on them. All this stuff is really important. And just what's their body language or demeanor. For example, part of the reason I projected Cam York to make the Flyers or to be, I guess, at the time, there wasn't Keith Yandel and this kind of more veteran defensive group ahead of him. But the reason I projected is that I watched his demeanor, how he was going through drills, how his body language was, what he does on the ice that separates him from the others. And he looked like a pro, being 2 years younger than most people on his team. And I mean this of the dev group. Typically when you got a guy coming in and it's his first time at dev camp, he doesn't look like the most seasoned guy. Talent, yes, but doesn't always look so comfortable. Cam York made it seem like it. Again, bored is not the right word, but he was definitely not intimidated by what was going on. He had probably did the best job of the drills of any of the defensemen, and that includes Igor Zamula and includes several defensemen who are older than him. He just never really struggled with any aspect at dev camp, and these are the things I really look for. And how their shoulders stand, how their confidence is. It's a big thing. If we look at somebody like Travis Sanheim, part of the problem with him is that he's really confidence-driven. I've said this over and over again. It's not that he lacks confidence, but his confidence can be shaken a lot quicker than a guy like Ivan Provorov, who, he can have a bad game, and the next night he's a machine. He's coming back. He's putting it behind him. That's a sign of maturity. I mean, I'm 34 right now, and my ability to shake off things that happen to me has vastly improved over the years. At 18, 19, it was very difficult. Even 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. It just gets easier as you get older. So when you see a young guy kind of shake stuff off, It's impressive. So let's get into the dev camp list that just came out. Quick news of note. Ali Lishkil has been sent back, or has been loaned. So he's going to go back overseas, even though he was signed to a contract. He doesn't look like he will be part of this organization for the year. Having said that, it's not really a problem. They're still going to own his rights. But he is a guy who probably would have been an effective AHL player, but to what degree, I'm not sure. He did have a good season the previous year, and he's got skill. He's undersized, but he's a skilled player. So he's one of those guys that you kind of draft, and you draft him and hope that he turns out to be something a little bit more than he is. All right, so let's move forward, and let's talk about the training camp invites, and then I'll go through my projected lines for the Flyers, though I do admit that it's way too early for this. First guy, Wade Allison. Interesting, he's here at Dev Camp, but not that interesting considering he's had some injury concerns, so he's missed a lot of time. Having said that, he's a pretty talented guy. He's pretty strong, mature mentally. So I do suspect he will compete for a spot in the lineup. I think by the end of the year, he took Nicolas Aube-Kubel's spot. We'll see. I mean, I don't want to take away from Kubel. I've been a little harsh on him, just in the sense that I see him as maybe a movable asset, but I do think he's an improving player. He's a little bit older than Allison, so I could see maybe he takes a bump this year. Maybe he forces Allison to start at the minors. But the way Allison looked last year, I wouldn't be surprised. Now we have a couple of invites. John Randell Avon and Ethan Burrows. Now, these guys are both forwards, a center and a right wing, respectively. They both played in the OHL last year. Don't have any info on them in front of me at the moment. I just think it's interesting that there are so many camp invites here. I'll go through some of the other ones, and if they have stats next to them, I'll go through that. I didn't have time to look this stuff up ahead of time, but I wish I could take a look at them at camp. Some of these guys might be interesting because, just a reminder, Phil Myers and Igor Zamula were both camp invites and guys that made the team. So when guys are underexposed, which we saw a lot of under the COVID era, creates opportunity. So I could see the Flyers maybe having a look at these guys at one point, but weren't sure. Maybe they didn't get to play that much, right? It was obviously in the OHL, so OHL invites, they didn't really get to play, these kids. So it's a good idea to invite some of these Canadian juniors players who didn't play overseas, who didn't have an opportunity to play, see where they are. I mean, worst comes to worst, you get a steal. So something to keep an eye on. This is actually a more exciting camp invite than normal, I would say. All right, then we got Jackson Cates. Cates had a little bit of stint with the Flyers last year. Interesting prospect. I'm more excited about his brother, personally, but he is an interesting guy. I mean, he's fully matured. He got some time with the Flyers last year. He had good numbers in the NCAA. He could project to be a fourth-line player in the NHL from what I can see. Maybe he's more than that, but doesn't look like he has anything about his game that necessarily sticks out of the crowd. But worst comes to worst, he's going to be a kind of a Flyers asset to a degree. Maybe an AHL guy, but it's a good thing to take a look on him. And obviously they liked his character because I don't think they bring him in for no reason, especially with his brother being in the system. They probably have seen quite a bit of him. So somebody to keep out for. One of the bigger names at camp will be Elliot Denoyer. He's coming over from the Q. He had a breakout year last year for the Halifax Mooseheads. Had some great numbers. He did play the same teams over and over again, but he performed really well. He went from being a guy who couldn't really produce at the junior level to being a guy who can produce the juniors level. So this is a guy probably with some NHL upside. Could be a steal. I don't know if he's anything above a third-line player at the NHL level, but even if he's a good NHL player, take him in the 5th round, he's somebody to keep an eye on. And I think his tenacity and his character are what will get him into the NHL, similar to Zayd Wisdom, who's more skilled, I would say. But overall, I think it's one of those hungry players you like to see. Then Tyson Forrester, he's coming back. He already did really well in the AHL. He's an interesting one because we don't really know how good he is. I mean, he was better in the AHL than anticipated. I don't expect him to make the Flyers out of camp or anything like that, but I do expect him to get a long look just in the sense that he has an NHL shot already. And I do think he'll have an increased role with the Phantoms. I mean, in 24 games, he had 10 goals, 7 assists. That's, I don't want to say exceptional, but it's very good. I don't know what he projects to be long-term. It does seem to me like he's maybe a second-line goal scorer, but he's got really good size, strength. We'll see what he is. He's listed as a center, but he's definitely more of a winger And I do suspect the Flyers will try to maybe even mold him into a center if it's possible. I mean, the kid's got really good size. He's got a booming shot. But it does seem to me like maybe he'll end up actually playing left wing at some point because he is a righty. And maybe you want to let him kind of, rip that shot. But the Flyers are pretty deep there. So there's an opportunity for him to make noise. But with Wade Allison, Albay Kubel above him, I just expect him to have a big role for the Phantoms this year. Now, Morgan Frost is another camp invite. This is because of his injury. I don't think Frost is very far away from making the NHL. Like maybe he needs a little bit of work on his D, but his offensive game is sick. His skating is sick. He still has to work on his two-way play a little bit. Like one of the things Bill Meltzer always says about him is like stares. He doesn't move his feet a lot in between plays. I do think that will be adjusted. He was able to make an offensive impact early in the NHL, which is a great sign. We just want to see how he is physically. He missed a lot of time. So the dev camp is really just to... I think the Flyers expect him to compete for a third-line center spot this year. If not, potentially even move him. I don't think there's going to be a rush to move him, but they need to move some cap space. They might need a different type of player at some point. I don't think he's the type of guy you give up on in any sense. I don't think the Flyers are desperate to get rid of him or anything like that at all. But if you go a few years and you don't know what his role is going to be, and you need a middle six center. You could consider moving Frost for maybe another young guy with a similar skill set or a different skill set with a similar projection. As of right now, he projects to be maybe a second line, potentially a top line center. I would say top line if he made it in already, but it doesn't mean he can't be a star player. Everybody knows. I think he could. My opinion, usually star players take time to develop. So. I love Frost. I'm really excited to see what he can do this year. And if he can improve his defensive game, which I think he definitely can, I see him being an impact player in the NHL this year. To what degree, I'm not sure, but it would be interesting to see him all of a sudden in Calder Trophy nominations because he's a player who can produce offense. And this team has a center spot open right now. And I think right now he's the top of the list. So I expect a big season from him. Tanner Lazinski, also a guy who could be playing in the NHL. Again, injury problems with him, but he did get a nice cup of tea. He will be having to recover. That's the reason he's at dev camp. I think it's smart to bring him into dev camp. Same with him and Allison. If you were injured, check up on him. Make sure you give him a little bit of pointers to get as healthy as they can. Conditioning is going to be a huge part this year, so every kid needs to be ready and as conditioned as possible. All right, Owen McLaughlin, this is this year's draft pick, 7th round pick. Again, we don't really know what to expect from him, but 7th round pick, you're bringing him in. It's going to be a good time to get a look at him. He had some decent numbers in the AAAs, but I don't expect to see anything from him of late. But decent size, 6 foot, but only 165, so he's going to be a development in progress. He's pretty skinny for a guy that tall. Connor McLennan. This is a really interesting guy because this is a guy who's taken the 6th round pick, but was originally projected as a 1st round pick. He's undersized, but he did very well in the WHL. He's done very well in WHL every year. And this past year, he was above a point per game player. This is an interesting guy. I don't know if he's going to be sticking with the team. I think they might want to give him one more year, but definite NHL potential. A guy who produces that high, if he can get above his size limitations, which seems to me like potentially he can, it could be really interesting to see where it goes as far as, where's his game going to develop. He is a point producer, again, undersized, but that just means he's going to take him a little bit more time. But very interesting, and if I can see some footage of him from this year, it'd be awesome. Unfortunately, I'm in another country, so I won't be able to see him at Dev Camp. So Isaac Ratcliffe, I've mentioned him on my podcast a few times. This is a big year for him. He's slowly come along. Again, just like Morgan Frost, same draft year as well as Nolan Patrick. He's 6'6". He's a big kid. He was an early 2nd round pick, projected to be a 1st round pick, scored goals at the lower levels. I do see him projected as a middle 6 forward, potentially even a top 6 forward if he can get his game together. Right now, I don't say he's done that. But I do think that this AHL season is a big year. I think they're going to increase his role. I think he's going to play a 2-way role, and I think you're probably going to see him put up some points this year. I don't know if he's going to get a call up to the NHL. He'll probably make it up on his 2nd contract, but it's really nice to see that we have a really big, strong kid who was always going to take a lot of time to develop, and somebody definitely keep an eye on. All right, Nolan Ritchie. This is another camp invite. He's 5'9", 174. Listed as center for played for Brandon in WHL. 27 points in 24 games, which is pretty good. Again, this is another opportunity just to take another look at a guy. The numbers are pretty good. It seems to me like he's undersized, so maybe he would have been like a 7th-round pick, potentially, type of guy. We'll see how his numbers develop, but the numbers are decent. And again, a Brandon player. I think, again, an interesting camp invite. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys get a second look, or maybe one of them gets a contract by the end. I've seen it happen before, and this year is a year of mystery. Linus Sandin is back. Again, he's a more developed player, but hasn't played in the NHL much. Struggled for the Phantoms at times, but also played well. Only 6 goals, 4 assists, 10 points in 26 games. He did play for HV71 as well. The guy is a thumper, I would say, to some degree. A grinder, 6'1". We'll see. I don't project him to be an NHL player, but, I could be wrong. I see him more along the lines like Jackson Cates. Could be a swing guy. Could be a guy who called up through injury. We'll see. Matthew Strome, big size, 6'4", 205. We know him. He's got skating issues. He did spend time between the ECHL and the AHL. Didn't produce well. This could be a make-or-break year for Matthew Strome. I could see him maybe moving on to another franchise because the Flyers really haven't taken hold of him. And he hasn't produced even at the ECHL level. So his skating has definitely been an issue. So it was a nice pick at the fourth round, at least like a nice hope. But a guy that, I don't know if they're going to give up on him this year, but he's got to make the Phantoms this year. So dev camp is important for him. Maxim Sushko, this is a guy with NHL potential. Played in the KHL. Had some games in the NHL this past year. Didn't produce like he did in the past, which is interesting because he was better the previous year. So maybe taking a dip there in his development. Didn't see that with just him as far as young guys. So we'll see how he rebounds. But this is a guy who potentially could be an NHL player. I do expect him to play a bigger role for the Phantoms if he rebounds. The guy has a two-way game, and he's a shooter. So it's his opportunity to take. Samu Tumala, this is this year's second-round pick. This is a highly skilled, highly talented Finnish kid. Projected at one point to be a first-round pick, but didn't make it to be a first-round pick. I think the Flyers probably had him relatively high on the list. Seems like a really nice pick for second-round pick. It is a boomer-bust type of pick. He doesn't seem to be the type of guy who could project to be an NHL player unless he is an offensive point producer, so I don't necessarily think he's going to have a two-way game at this point in his career, but he is Finnish. They do tend to focus on that. They do focus on conditioning quite a bit. So we'll see. I think he's maybe the most intriguing guy at camp at this point because not everybody knows really to expect of him, and the Flyers didn't have a first-round pick, and he's a guy who is a scorer and offensive player. I could see him sticking out a little bit. And there's a bunch of good prospects missing from this list, NCAA guys, for instance, and that kind of makes sense. Zayd Wisdom, he is injured, unfortunately, out indefinitely at this point, but I do expect him to play a big role for the Phantoms when he comes back. He had a great first year. He's exactly what the Flyers want. I could see him starting on the fourth line and working his way up lineup. Definitely a third-line player at this point, projecting. Pretty good size, very strong, decent skater, great attitude, tenacious. I think the Flyers really like him. I think they'll want to hold on to him for a while and develop him slowly. So Zayd will be there probably to some respect, but I don't know how much ice time he will actually get. All right, let's go to the defenseman, Linus Högberg. Högberg is an interesting guy because he's still relatively young. He had good success overseas, had some decent success with the Phantoms this year, 8 points in 26 games. I expect his role to increase. He's 6'1", listed at 176. I could see him probably weighing a little bit more than that. But he was a former fifth-round pick. I think he'll probably play maybe at times a top 4 role for the Phantoms this year. I don't expect him to touch the NHL ice, but you never know. At least this year. But I could see him a guy maybe slowly developing into an NHL player. At the very least, going to be a very good defenseman in the SHL, which, in my opinion, is still a win. If you can pick a guy who's a very good pro around the world, it's not a wasted pick. especially the 5th round. Mason Millman. This is a guy who played with the Phantoms last year. He was brought in a little early due to the type of season we had. He only produced 3 points in 13 games last year, so he didn't play enough. I don't know if the Flyers will hold on to him all season, but potentially. He is a kid with great motor. He's kind of like Sanheim light, so we'll see how that works out. We'll see how that works out. So next we'll go to Ethan Sampson. This is this year's first round pick, 6th round. He played for Prince George. We know his connection to Flyers' current, Phantom's current assistant coach, former Flyer, the Gator. I'm pretty excited about Jason Smith being back. So we'll get a good look at him. It's cool just to see these guys come into Dev Camp. Then 2 more camp invites here. Quinn Schmeiman. I'm definitely saying that wrong. But he also played in the WHL last year. 2 goals, 15 assists in 22 games. That's not bad at all, actually, for a young kid. We'll see how he does. He's not that young. He's a little bit older, so I don't know. I think you never know with these type of guys. And then the next with Jackson Van de Leest. I think I'm saying that right. Now, he's the most intriguing guy, in my opinion. He's 6'7", 240 pounds. You talk about another Samuel Moran type of body type. 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points in 21 games in the WHL. Interesting. Very interesting. Everybody loves defensemen with size. I don't know if he's actually going to project to be an NHL player or anything like that, but even if he plays for the Phantoms with that kind of size, it'd be a nice... It's a nice invite. You always want to take a look at these big defensemen. You never know how they develop. They take a little bit longer. Wyatt Wiley's back. He had a good season with the AHL Phantoms last year. I think he can produce more than a goal and 6 assists. I'm looking forward to see what he could do. I think Wyatt Wiley will have an increased role in the AHL this year, more power play time, and I expect him to be a big... Again, he plays the right side as a D-man, so the Flyers will be developing him. I don't think he's going anywhere. Former 5th-round pick, so excited about him. All right, now Cam York. This guy is, I would say, NHL ready on a bad team, at least a thin defense. I don't think that he'll start with the Flyers. I'm pulling that back now. Again, with the additions of Yandel, I don't see it happening. I see him probably slotted as number 9 right now, behind Glendening and Samuel Moran. They'll probably rotate those guys. But Cam York will see the NHL this year. I don't know at one point, but they will have injuries, and the Flyers will need him. And I wouldn't be surprised if people think that he should make the team over some other guys. But it's a better idea to develop him slowly. It definitely can't hurt. So Cam York probably will be the stud at camp, I expect. Igor Zamula, this is a guy who's close to NHL ready as well. He's big. Hopefully he added some size this year. He's got a little bit of a flawed game, but he's got incredible poise for a guy his age. He didn't produce offensively, so in the AHL last year. So the Flyers will want him to produce this year, but I expect him to have a big role for the Phantoms. And that's going to be a big part of it this year. So maybe he'll be playing top pairing, maybe just top 4. But he'll definitely get power play time. Definitely needs to produce offensively. But the Flyers will take their time with him. I never really thought the Flyers were going to move quickly on him. Then Brian Zanetti. This is a guy who was drafted this year in the 4th round, 6'2", 181. Again, played for Lugan, the under 20. 9 goals, 20 assists in 41 games. It's not bad at all. He's 6'2", 181. Again, a development in progress, but I like his build. Numbers are decent. Interesting pick. And then Zach Cooper. This was a guy who was brought in a little bit older than some of the other guys. Already has AHL time. I think he will probably be a versatile defenseman for the Flyers. He's 5'10", 165, so it tells me he's probably more of a puck mover. He had some points in the AHL, but he played in Slovakia and put up 10 points in 15 games and then 7 points in 21 games for the Phantom. So he can produce. So we'll see. I don't know enough about him, but wish I could take a look at him. And then Samuel Ersson. Ersson is an interesting pickup. in general. I think he's going to compete for the number 3 spot. I think they'll take their time with him. I think Sandstrom he's not on this list, and I think it shows. The Flyers see him as the number 3 guy right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ersan comes in and turns some heads. He is a talented goaltender. Has already been playing against men and not playing on a good team and playing very well. Krylus Domenko lost an entire year, unfortunately. Sucks, but also a talented goaltender in his own right. So we'll see what he can do. We'll see how he produces, how he rebounds. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets off to a slow start, but again, you got 3 young goalies. So ECHL time probably, or maybe they just rotate the 3 of them. I could see a veteran guy being signed later in the year as well for the AHL level at some point. I just wouldn't be shocked. But both of those goalies are really good, so it's cool to see that. Surprising there's actually not a 3rd goalie there at Dev Camp. But will be interesting. You would think there may be an invite for Dev Camp. So those are really interesting. Love the camp stuff. And then let's go through my lines. Top line. This is... there's going to be a lot of controversy with these type of things early. And I don't mean like malicious, but we're not going to agree. At this point, could I see Claude Giroux playing center? Potentially, but not in the bottom 6, right? And if Kevin Hayes isn't ready, then he'll play in the bottom 6, and Giroux will play second-line center. I don't think that's what they're going to try to roll out. I do think Cam Atkinson's the first shooter that this team has had in quite a while. I do think he'll get a long look at top right wing. He's also more defensively responsible than Travis Konechny, so potentially it could be a vicious line to play against. So Giroux, Atkinson, and Couturier are my top line right now, but I could see TK, could see Farabee there, could see Albie Kubel there, not Albie Kubel, I'm sorry, Oscar Lindblom there. Who knows at this point, but there's going to be a nice mix of stuff. The second line, Kevin Hayes, I do think will start a second line. It'll be interesting to see how he recovers. I think Farabee will probably play a role in this top 6. But James Van Riemsdyk earned being back in the top 6, so he'll get a look there. I think he'll probably start off either second or third line. Again, these lines are so hard to predict right now because there's a few guys here who are not bottom 6 wingers. So James Van Riemsdyk, maybe a third line role. I do think if Frost makes his team, maybe playing him with somebody like Oscar Lindblom is a smart move just because Lindblom's very good defensively and Frost isn't. So there's potential there. Maybe they play him with Scott Lawton too. Maybe they play Lawton on the wing around him also. Maybe move Lawton to the right side. He's a pretty versatile guy. But maybe that's a third line. Lawton, Lindblom, and Frost. Something like that. I don't know. I really don't know. Again, I can call me out on any of these, and you can change my opinion on majority of the stuff I'm saying. And then I do think TK will play their first or second line winger. I don't think they want to start him off on the third line unless you shift Farabee over to the right, which is definitely possible. I don't think I think the center, fourth line center role will be taken by Nate Thompson to start the year. Albie Kubel or Allison will play that right side. Lazinski has a chance to take a spot there. Maybe it's Lawton, but I think Lawton gets paid too much to be a fourth line player at this point. We're gonna see a lot of mix and matching, and maybe some surprises. But Albie Kubel will be with this team, right? Allison, these lines. I feel embarrassed. I can't even come up with the top line. So let me just come up with it. I'll do Giroux, Couturier, Atkinson, second line. I'm just gonna say that it'll be TK, JVR, and Hayes. And then third line, let's just say, again, I don't think this is accurate. Let's just say it's Lindblom, Frost, potentially even Lawton, and then maybe Farabee plays the right side. And then the fourth line, maybe that is Lawton, Thompson, and either Allison or Albie Kubel. It's a vicious group of forwards to play against. If they play to their potential, that's a tough team to defend against. There's a lot of good players there. Nate Thompson playing in the middle. Again, he's a workhorse. Maybe he starts the 13th forward, and they start Lawton as fourth line center. potentially. But I think it really just depends on how ready Frost is. He's only 22 years old, so they might take their time with him. Defense-wise, I do expect Provorov, Ryan Ellis, obviously to get the nod there. I do think they'll start off with Ristolainen and Sanheim. Sanheim's still waiting on a contract. And then I do think it'll be Braun and Yandel. Having said that, I could see them mixing and matching quite a bit, like Rasmus Ristolainen playing with Provorov a bit in preseason, Ryan Ellis playing with Sanheim, Yandel playing with Ryan Ellis, Yandel playing with Rasmus Ristolainen, Braun playing with Sanheim. I think we will see that. I think Morin will be that swing extra guy. I don't think he'll be playing forward at all again. Potentially if they're bringing him in just a scrap, but I don't see that happening. And then Jones and Carter Hart. Man, it's interesting. I think Jones will probably rebound better than people think, and I think Carter Hart is a sick, talented goaltender, and I don't expect many issues this year from him. The power play, I think, will be very interesting. I don't know who's going to run this power play, but several defensemen can do the top one. I do think Provorov will still play a role in the power play. I think Ellis will. I think Rasmus Ristolainen might even at some point, but Keith Yandel was obviously brought in to play power play time here. Unless his game is completely dropped off, I can see him playing second unit to some degree, maybe playing the role that Niskanen played. We'll see, because Travis Sanheim can also move the puck. So it's going to be an interesting group. The power play is going to be very interesting. If Wade Allison makes the team, that's a guy who can play in front of the net. It's a guy who can score goals. But I do want to see Atkinson play with Giroux. This is the first time we've had a guy who shoots first with Giroux in a long time. The closest thing we had to that was, Braden Shen and Hartnell? Jeff Carter, Simone Gagne. How long ago was that? So let's see what those lines end up being. I'm excited to see them, but Dev Camp is here. The Flyers are here. Let's get rolling on the season.